Well, this is where the magic typically tends to happen, in the Northern Lights training room for North Bay, and then in training rooms B and C, I believe, in Sudbury. So when hosting larger scale public events like the Feed Your Brain or anything else that has a combination of on-site and online participants, we're going to want to utilize the technology that we have here to make the best experience for both sets of participants. What I'm going to do now is actually take you through the setup of the webinar environment using bits and pieces from both the mobile kit and the dedicated WebEx computer, as well as the screens that are in the training rooms. So this process can really be used for North Bay and Sudbury because the technology is relatively the same. I want to preface this video by saying, in accordance with IT strategy, make sure that you have a zero user footprint practice implemented in any training room that you use for webinars. That is to say, whatever you take out of place in order to facilitate the webinar, you put back. Chairs in their places, cameras and tripods, signing out of any of the dedicated computers for the WebEx environment, even putting the screens back up on Airtame as you see that I've done in front of me. Without further ado, let's get started. So what I see in front of me is a part of the setup in the Northern Lights room with the WebEx computer on one side and its corresponding tripod camera just off to the right of it when you're facing it. So that's usually the hardware that I'll use for the brunt of the presentation, but I also like to set myself up in a certain part off to the side of the webinar. So here I'm, far enough away in the Northern Lights room, closest to the windows, out of the way of the participants who would be sitting just off in front of me or behind you in the camera, making sure that that everything is working. That way, if I keep up close enough to the front as well, I'll be able to make sure that the meeting host or the webinar facilitator, should he or she have any technical concerns during the webinar, I'll be able to really quickly jump in and assist. So it's always best to set up the mobile kit side here, but have the WebEx camera and the computer and the screens running with the webinar materials for the presenter's convenience. Okay, so what I begin by doing when I get the WebEx computer ready at the front of the room is take the handy-dandy remote that works for the 3 TVs in our training room, and I put them into the appropriate inputs. There is a television to the back of me, right in front of me, to the back of all of the participants, where for presenter's convenience, I would have his or her PowerPoint projecting those kinds of things so that the person can keep track of, the presentation as it unfolds, rather than having to always turn his or her back to the camera and away from the participants in the room. So we typically put that computer onto the WebEx dedicated channel. Same thing goes in Sudbury. So I'll go ahead and do that now. So you don't see it, but I have it up in front of me. And then what I'll do is just slightly lift the lid of the WebEx computer and move it so that the screen, the login screen for the WebEx computer actually shows up on the screen behind me. So with that in mind, we have wireless mouse and keyboard for the 2 SP4s that are at the front of the room. What I would do at this point is just simply log into the WebEx computer by using the password and the information that's on that's actually on the cover of the screen. So anytime you're using the mobile kit or any of these dedicated computers, for the time being, the password's safety first, FIRST, all in lowercase. But if that ever changes, the labels will change as well. So you use whatever the current password is. And as soon as I've logged in and can actually see the screen behind me, I'm going to start playing around with the televisions up here. In the case of a Feed Your Brain webinar, what I typically do is use the best strategy that I can for making sure that there's content on both screens. So what I often do, and I'm not going to do it in front of you today, but something that you can think about doing is using the guest computer to show a PowerPoint slide with the title of the Feed Your Brain workshop or whatever the webinar that you're looking at will be. And then on the other on the other screen, you would actually have the same presentation running that the presenter would see in the back. So, dedicated WebEx channel on the back, Airtame to this computer, let's say, or to this screen. Okay, so either way you can duplicate the screens, which will make it incredibly simple for a presenter to just click through his or her PowerPoint and go ahead and discuss. This is already on Airtame, so now all I need to do with the WebEx computer is connect to Airtame using the steps that you would for any other computers really in the offices. So now you can see that the Airtame is showing up on the screen, and I can still see what's on the back. All right, so now I've gotten the PowerPoint up and running on the WebEx computer, and again I can see it on the rear presentation screen as well as on the screen just behind me. So at this point in time, I'd be able to start the slideshow. And I'd be able to carry on with my presentation because again, I can see it at the back, I can see it at the front. I would have the rolling banner on this side of the presentation. I'd be able to click through my presentation, very fancy and informative presentation on making presentations as I see fit. Okay. You may, at your place, provided they're charged up, you may notice that you have a stylus for the WebEx computer and one for the guest computer as well. Try taking advantage of these and getting your presenters to use the clickers to facilitate the presentation as well. It could be very convenient for that person.
Okay, so now I'm getting ready for my webinar. I have the first thing that I'm going to have to do is set up the mobile kit SP4 with the host account. So the wsn.webex.com event center main host would actually be on this computer, and then I would make the dedicated WebEx computer up at the front of the room my panelist. So to do that, I'll take you through it. I'm in a Chrome browser right now. I'm going to click on the Event Center button as we did to set up the webinar. Click on Login, enter in my information, and as soon as I get to the main page, I'm going to go to Site Events to be able to find my webinar that I had set up. I see it there, so I'll be able to click on Start. And the WebEx will appear in front of me. Now at this point, what I would probably want to do, as I mentioned earlier, is take down the event number because I'll likely be using that to set up the other computer, the WebEx computer, to get it ready for the presenter. So far so good. All of this is taken care of, at least in terms of the mobile kit side. Now what we're going to do is move to the next computer, and I'm going to show you how to set that one up.
Okay, so now it's time to get the WebEx computer ready for the presentation. At this point, I've scheduled the webinar. I have my host computer set up, which is the mobile kit at the side of the room. Now I'm going to get this one, which is displayed on both of these screens, ready for the webinar itself. So what I'll do with it, and you can follow along behind me, is open Google Chrome. Again, because it's got the bookmarks to the Event Center, the Meeting Center. I'll select the Event Center for a webinar, and because I made note of what the meeting number is, I'll be able to enter that into this particular window. So meeting numbers often, or they always change rather, so there's not one meeting number that's going to stay the same in the Event Center, so just keep that in mind. And it's going to prompt me to join the event, entering in the information that I used to register previously. So because my name was Workplace Safety North, I'll toss that into the first and last names, add in my email address, and the event password, which we've already put as safe. I hit enter to join the webinar, and now I see it up on my screen in front of me. This WebEx computer is what I'm going to use for audio settings for the presenter. Often the person will use the wireless headset for, for the facilitation of the webinar. I'll also have the camera with the tripod, which I'm going to set up on the screen just a few seconds from now, coming from this person's computer. So here's where it might get a little bit complicated, but it's relatively simple as soon as you get at the hang of what you're doing. So now that I'm on WebEx on this computer, I can't do anything because I'm logged in as a participant. I need to return to my host computer and pass privileges along to said attendee. Now, as soon as I've set it up so that I've made the attendee a panelist and I've given the person presenter privileges, I have a lot more leeway with what I can do here in terms of showing video, broadcasting audio, and of course presenting the PowerPoint. So the next thing I'm going to do is set up the camera. You should have a camera with a tripod available in the Sudbury training rooms as well as in North Bay. It's typically tucked away, so that's not too bad. In North Bay, I typically tend to put the tripod as far out of view as I can, you know, from participants, but I'll typically have it just off to the side right here toward the end of the tables. That way, it's not a trip hazard for anyone. I can still plug it into the wall because it's, you know, far or just close enough that the cables will fit, and it will give me a really good angle for the presenter, him or herself. So I'll go ahead and set that up. And then as soon as I have the camera set up for this WebEx computer here, I'll go ahead and proceed through my video settings and make sure that it's going to work. So I've clicked on the camera button similar to what I would do with the Event Center, and I'll just maximize it so that I can make sure it's going to work. So now I can see myself, I can do a video test, make sure that I'm going to remain in the angle no matter where I decide to present from, able to show my PowerPoints from both sides. You can see the other cameras working up here, so I think we're good to go. Okay. Next thing I would do at this point is make sure that my audio settings are correct by picking up my wireless headset, putting it on my ear, checking the audio settings, and connecting to audio this way. Perfect. It's very straightforward. Now the last thing I need to do is set up the PowerPoint presentation on both screens. So I would share an application to do that. And for more information on sharing applications, you can consult the how-to guide for super users or ask another member of the steering committee. So I've shared my PowerPoint presentation. I can put it into full screen. You may notice that just off to the top right-hand corner of the screen with the WebEx information, I can still see myself, or the presenter would be able to see him or herself in this environment. I would typically just minimize that by clicking on the little collapsible arrow in the screen and moving the video out of the way. It might be a little intimidating for a presenter to see him or herself while taking a look at the presentation to go through. And then from here, I would start the recording on the WebEx webinar from the host computer and just double check to make sure the audio settings are good by using my headphones on the MobileKit computer. But this is essentially it. So now the person can work through the webinar without any issue, clicking through the presentation slides and so on and so forth. Easy peasy.